Hey guys, it's Hina Sheth from Rebalance Physical Therapy, and I am here today with Dr. Georgia Tetlow. And go ahead.
Hi, nice to be here.
So, what I wanted to talk today, obviously there's many of you guys out there that are suffering from constipation, IBS, or some type of gastrointestinal disorder. And today we kind of wanted to focus a little bit around constipation and IBS. And you know, people may not understand that it's a physical issue sometimes with constipation, that the muscles can actually be involved, and many of you guys don't even realize that muscles are involved in constipation. But then there's also obviously an internal, internal side of things as far as, what you're eating, what you might be taking in, or other things inflammatory that might be happening in the body. And that's where, as a physical therapist, I try to work in coordination with a lot of other healthcare providers, such as Dr. Georgia Tetlow, because she is skilled in internal medicine as well as integrative medicine, and she is here to kind of talk to you about how all of that can affect constipation. So, what we wanted to start off with just talking about is, first of all, what is constipation? Because I think there is a misunderstanding sometimes on what it is and what you can be experiencing. So, Dr. Tetlow, why don't you tell us, what is constipation?
Yeah, thank you so much, Hina, and it's great to be here with you because I really enjoy collaborating with you, and I understand that it's really important for my patients to engage with their bodies and work very closely with skilled physical therapists such as yourself and your team, and we really value what you offer as a professional. So in my work as an integrative physician, understanding that the gut is really an important foundation for health and healing, and it's an important place to look when things aren't working as well. So when we have a chronic illness or when we have pain, we'll often look at the gut. So I'm so glad we have a chance to talk about constipation and irritable bowel symptoms and the experience of IBS, because it's a huge reason for people to come and see us. If there's something either uncomfortable or that just doesn't feel right or doesn't feel like their body is working properly, that they'll come into the office. So your question about constipation, in my work, constipation means either frequency of bowel movements or the sensation and experience of not actually having a full bowel movement would constitute constipation. So there's two different types of situations that we look at, and there's lots of physiological reasons for those, and part of the reason for people to come is for us to zero in on root causes.
Right.
And the coordination and the relaxation and the way the pelvic floor works is so key for having someone heal a chronic issue, because sometimes they've learned a certain way for their body to be. They need to relearn new ways. And that's absolutely essential to engage with physical therapy to do that.
Yeah, and I think many people sometimes don't realize that constipation can, sometimes they think if I'm not having 2 bowel movements a day that I'm constipated, or, if their stool actually looks a certain way that they're constipated. So would you agree that, if you're having 1 bowel movement a day versus, 1 every other day or even every 2 days, is that considered like normal? And then if you're having every 2-3 days, is that still considered normal? Is that still constipation? Mm-hmm. How would you kind of define that?
So everything that we do in integrative medicine is personalized. So we try not to put people in boxes and to label them with, they have these certain symptoms and then they get these labels like diagnostic labels. So everything needs to be individualized for a diagnosis and also for a treatment. So if someone is not eliminating stool for 2 or 3 days, that is not considered as healthy as that person could be, simply because the process of elimination is really important for detoxification. And so there's hormones that have been broken down that are actually sitting in our stool. So when stool sits for longer than a day or day and a half, maximum 2 days, I think 2 days is a little bit too long for those detoxification products, because what happens is the person will reabsorb the toxins that have been identified for elimination. And that's really important in estrogen related conditions and many pain conditions. do have an associated hormonal imbalance.
Okay, and that's really important to know, because I know that when you go to your general, GI doctor, sometimes they'll just say, oh, well, you're having a bowel movements every 2 to 3 days, even though that's not normal for you. But they say, well, that's not really considered constipation. So, maybe try upping your fiber or your water, which is what common things that you can do to kind of help constipation. But someone just feels like, hey, I used to be having one every day when I was, in my 20s and 30s maybe. But all of a sudden, after this certain event happened, or after I had surgery, or whoever, maybe it wasn't anything, my bowel movements have just slowed down, and that's not normal for me. So that's actually really important to be able to realize, is that just because you don't fall in the norm category of every 2-3 days, you still could be considered constipated, even if if it's just not normal for you, then it's a good idea to have it checked out, because that could be interfering. There could be something interfering. So,
and we would definitely say, if we weren't working more individually with someone, as a statement, 1 to 2 formed bowel movements each day is one of the norms that we work with in the human body.
Wow, that's great.
That means that there's a bell curve, and there's people that are a little bit to the left and a little bit to the right, meaning more frequent or less frequent.
Right.
But that is the bell curve, like the median.
The median, yeah.
1 to 2 formed bowel movements a day.
Okay, and then by formed, because some people may not even understand what formed means. So obviously your stool can vary, right? Everyone hopefully does observe their stool, but for those of you who may not understand, what is your stool telling you, right? I think it's really important that we understand that what your stool looks like actually may tell you what your body's doing. So you can have stool, obviously, that can vary from very liquidy, which is considered almost like diarrhea, and then you can have all these different stages, and then you can have hard pebble-like stool. And so constipation would be,
well, there's different ways to think about constipation, right? There's what your stool looks like. There's the internal sensation of what it feels like to have a bowel movement. There's frequency of bowel movements. So there's lots of different ways to consider to term constipation. So if you have stool that's hard to pass, for example, it's dry, and it's the consistency of it is just, it's hard to move it through your body in order to have the bowel movement. Sometimes there's a scraping sensation. I mean, it can be very uncomfortable to move constipated stool. That has to do with the transit time. Our time is actually a little bit too long before we're having a bowel movement. We are constipated, and so that can be part of the picture too.
okay.
So I wouldn't say it's just one thing about the stool looks like this, or it's this frequent, or it's this sensation of having a full or not having a full bowel movement. It's a whole, it's a series of things. And it's really, really essential to health to eliminate and to detoxify. Your body has gone through so many steps to say, this is not something I need, this is something that I would like to tag for elimination, this is something I would like to have move out of my body, and not to actually fully eliminate and let go of those things that we've worked so hard to detoxify, can really cause a lot of health problems. And we simply don't feel well.
Yeah, and I can totally, I'm sure all of you guys who are suffering from constipation or some type of IBS symptom can attest to that. You just don't feel right. You feel bloated, you don't feel yourself, your stomach doesn't feel like it's flat, which can aesthetically make you feel, uncomfortable, and just body image wise you don't feel good. And then also just from a health standpoint, you might not feel like you have the same energy levels, you might not feel like working out that day. It's hard to take care of your kids and just do your everyday tasks. So this was super helpful. Now, the next time we talk, we're going to be expanding on this topic. Obviously, Dr. Tetlow and I were actually talking before we even videoed this that, we'll just have a 5-minute discussion on constipation. And I thought just talking about what constipation is would only be maybe a minute long, but obviously we've already talked 5 minutes or more on what constipation is. So the next time we talk, I'm going to actually talk about the musculoskeletal side, because not only, as we've talked about, constipation has to do with how the frequency and what your stool looks like and how it feels like, but what's actually happening when you're constipated from a physiologic standpoint, as well as what your muscles should be doing, because many of you guys may not realize that there's actually muscles that have to relax in order for you to pass stool, and those muscles are part of the pelvic floor complex, which again, many of you may not even realize what a pelvic floor is, but it's really important in both men and women that these muscles are coordinated and they're working well, because it can actually cause backup in the system. So on our next video, we'll be talking a little bit more about that.